Hello, welcome to the screencast for Appearance and Reality by Bertrand Russell. So as a little introduction, you can look at the image on this slide. You see the two yellow dots. And this is a famous optical illusion where the squares underneath the yellow dots are the exact same color. And most people look at this and say that that cannot possibly be true. How could the one that's further away from us, that looks dark gray, be exactly the same as the one that's closer to us that looks white? But if you take this image and you put it in Paint or whatever image manipulation software you might have access to, and you do that little temperature tool, you'll see that they are exactly the same. But the shadow that the green object, the green cylinder, throws off changes our perception of the color underneath the dots. So in the frame of mind of optical illusions, we'll start this article, which is on page 78 in our textbooks. So if we want to know what counts as knowledge, maybe we need to know what's real, right? Before we just accepted that the common understanding of truth counted as what was real. It matched the outside world somehow. And now Bertrand Russell's going to take a deeper look at that truth. How do we know whether or not something is true? We would imagine that it has to be real to count as true. But in our everyday lives, it's pretty obvious what's real and what's not. We can see, feel, taste, smell, touch the way the external world works. It helps us, and it has helped us our whole lives, get through our days. And then, above and beyond that, we have the ability to reason and infer about those things that we sense and what we feel, our emotions. We generally, as long as we're healthy individuals, know the difference between fact and fiction. There are some gray areas that people don't necessarily agree on, but we do know that our senses and our reason have provided us with a pretty good guide to making our way through life. They're reliable. So why should we have any sort of problem with what's real and what's not? If we're thinking philosophically, we might ask how we can be sure about what we know is true and what we don't know, what we're not certain about. We know, for example, that we make mistakes with both our senses and with our reasoning. We looked at a bunch of examples of the latter when we looked at logical fallacies. We make that kind of mistake all the time. Sometimes we don't even realize that we're making errors in our reasoning. And with the optical illusion that I showed you right at the beginning, you know that we make mistakes with our senses sometimes. But it doesn't just have to be an optical illusion. We've all been overtired and thought we saw something out of the corner of our eyes, or when you're sick, things shift, and what we sense isn't always accurate. So is there anything that we can be absolutely certain about? Also, we can think about how we're limited in our cognitive capacities. We have the senses that we have, but aren't there parts of the world outside of what we can sense? We'll talk about this a little later in the semester as well, but bats use echolocation and sonar even, to sense with sound in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. We can map it out and we can test it and analyze it, but it's hard for us to know what it's like to possess that sense ourselves. So if we only get a limited slice of the outside world, how can we really know we're seeing what the world is actually like? Russell in this article wants us to consider things that seem obvious to us, but really, really think about it and not just laugh off and brush it off as what we see as obvious. If you remember the last article we read by Bertrand Russell, when he told us the value of philosophy, one of his major arguments was that when we think philosophically and we try to get to the fundamentals and we try to get to the most general cases, it'll help release us from our dogmatism. in our thinking. It'll expand the possibilities of what we can consider. So, like Russell, I encourage you to keep an open philosophical mind about the differences between appearance and reality. So, if you scrutinize the most simple and obvious truths, Russell claims that you'll start to see contradictions. So on page 78 to 79, I reproduced this long quote here. He says, any statement as to what is in our immediate experience makes us, I misread that. Any statement as to what it is that our immediate experiences make us know is very likely to be wrong. So our immediate experiences, or whatever we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch right in this moment. It seems to me, this is Russell speaking, that I'm now sitting at a chair at a table of a certain shape on which I see sheets of paper with writing or print. By turning my head, I see outside the window buildings and clouds and the sun. I believe that the sun is about 93 million miles away from the Earth, that it is a hot globe many times bigger than the Earth, and that owing to the Earth's rotation, it rises every morning and will continue to do so for an indefinite time in the future. He also goes on to say that he thinks that any other normal person coming in would see the same things and sense the same things that he was. And it seems too obvious to be stating, except when he's starting to think about whether or not he should doubt. He continues that all this stuff that seems so obvious to me and maybe any other normal person that would come into my office can be reasonably doubted. We have to make careful distinctions before we know what we can count as knowledge when we sense stuff. So he takes specifically the table. It's brown, it's oblong, it's shiny. But he says if another person did come in, they would see it from a different angle to him. They'd have a different set of eyes with different rods and cones. They'll see a slightly different shape because of perspective, and a slightly different color because the sunlight glinting on the surface of the table will be at different angles. If you walk around the table in a circle, the light will shift and it'll look like different colors to you and different shapes. So the time of day matters to the color that you think it is, and so does the color of the light bulb. So if you put a blue light bulb in, it would look different, or a regular one. So he knows that in everyday life, these differences don't matter. But if we're asking ourselves what is real and how can we know what's true, how do I know which set of environmental inputs tell us what the real table is? Is it daylight? Is it nighttime? Is it evening? Is it only when I have a bird's eye view of the table? We believe that there are objects, quote unquote, behind the constant bombardment we get from our senses. But we can reasonably doubt that because we have no standard to pick out which group of sensations counts as real. They all seem just as real, but they all are very different, depending on perspective. So we can press further into our sense perceptions of this same table. It looks smooth to your eyes, but say when you touch it, you can feel bumps and knots in the wood. So is the table really smooth, or is it really bumpy? What about if you looked at it through a microscope? Is the magnified image of the surface of the table more real than the image of it that we get from our eyes, or is it less real? So go back to that idea that you're going to walk around the table in a circle and look at it continuously and say that it's a rectangle. It's never going to look, almost never going to look perfectly rectangular. You think about it, if you see it from a 45-degree angle, the angles will look acute, they'll look narrow, and the perspective changes. The only time we might really see a rectangle is if we had a bird's eye view from the top. Otherwise, it won't look the same. We know that the surface of the table is hard. We know that wood is hard, but if we push heavily, it feels harder on our own nerves. If you push lighter, it feels less hard. changes how the wood feels. So the upshot for Russell here, and here's another long quote on page 80. It becomes obvious that the real table, if there is one, is not the same as what we immediately experience by our sight, touch, or hearing. The real table, if there is one, is not immediately known to us at all, but must be an inference from what is immediately known. Thus, two very difficult questions at once arise, namely, one, is there a real table at all? And two, what sort of object can it be? So I got these pictures of a table from the internet. The first three are from the same table, and you can see that their surface looks similar, but not exactly the same from image to image. Especially compare 1 and 2 to 3. The color, the richness of the reds in the wood grain looks very different from a different perspective. We have some sort of purple TV reflection on the third image, and the color changes. The very last image on the right is a microscopic image of wood. So is that what wood really looks like? Or is the macro human eye view what it really looks like? So you might notice in the quote he mentions that we need to infer from all the stuff that bombards our senses. And you might think, well, okay, our inferences have been reliable in the past, so then I must be fine with it, even if I'm not immediately sensing whatever the real human independent object is like. It stays steady and I can infer patterns. And Russell would agree with you, but he would say that because we never, because we're always inferring, we always have that layer of inference above and beyond whatever is actually there, we're always going to be stuck at the level of appearances. So to put it in another way, he gives us some terms. He says that the sensation is the experience, so whatever it is you feel, or see, or smell, or taste, or touch, the experience of being immediately aware of things, such as color, sounds, smells, hardnesses, roughnesses, etc. And then the sense datum is one little piece or packet of data that comes from the outside world, the color itself. Whatever it is from the outside world that impinges or affects our senses. So with light, it would be photons, the actual color in the world, the actual light in the world. So there are little packets, he thinks, that come and interact with our senses from the outside world, and those are the sense datum. And whatever they create, whatever feeling they create in us, is the sensation. So we get both the sensation, the feeling of the thing, and the sense data, the little packet from the outside world, but neither of those things is the table itself. We have to take those two things and make an inference. So Russell and most philosophers generally agree, there are some people that don't, we generally agree that there's a real table there, and it's independent of all human beings. But when we want to think about truth and what counts as knowledge, there are very big problems with knowledge about the real table, because all we have are these little packets from the outside world that we can infer about, and they're always changing. So his conclusions, his final conclusions about all this thinking about ordinary, everyday objects and how we understand them. His conclusions are, 1, what the senses immediately tell us is not the truth about the objects. We only ever get to appearances. And all these appearances depend upon the relationship between us, the object, and the environment around us. That's the truth that we get. We get truth about the relationship between us and objects, not the object itself. And as a closing thought, he wonders, is there any way to get beyond our capacities as sensing and reasoning agents to the thing itself. He's not sure. Many people aren't sure. But I want you to think about whether or not you think Russell has shown that there's more to reality than whatever appears to us immediately. So we started this screencast thinking about everyday objects and how it seemed obvious what is real. But now maybe we're at a point where those obvious things are a little bit more questionable. They're less reliable as truth than we might have thought.